With Wortox having gotten a skill tree, I simply must make a boss rush as him again. When it comes to my satisfaction with it, my opinions are rather mixed. There's quite a few skills I think are really bad, but I can't find it within myself to complain, because the good ones are incredibly fun and powerful. Wortox is now extremely good at exploring and traveling, but his combat abilities are subpar compared to a lot of others. This is mostly because his best combat perk is locked behind Shadow Rift. As such, defeating Fuel Weaver takes priority. There will also be 2 extra challenges in this run. The first is no eating souls, and the second uses a mod to remove the health from releasing souls. Since Wortox gains half stats from food, I will need to eat twice as much. Not being able to heal as easily makes things more interesting, but the healing also apparently makes Wortox pay to win. I'll be using this skill tree. I'll explain the function of things as I use them, as not to dump a bunch of information at the beginning, but I think a few things deserve immediate explanation. Lunar Affinity is a skill I will never actually use, and I think it's pretty bad. But it does give 10% bonus damage to shadows, which include a lot of enemies. Lifebringer 3 is also entirely useless when playing solo, but it skews the scale enough to give me the Nice Inclination. Nice Inclination makes dropped souls give 5 sanity, twice as their usual, allowing me to forego sanity preparations. Right out the gate, there's already 3 skills being used. Lifted Spirit 1, which increases speed during Soul Echo. Soul Echo is the time during which Wortox can teleport again after a Soul Hop. Lifted Spirits 2 increases the duration of Soul Echo from 5 to 7 seconds. Neither of these are game-changing, but Reverberation is. This gives you a second Soul Echo, allowing for 3 teleports per soul instead of 2. I got lucky here and found a bottle. Revealing Pearl's location early is important for this run, and the bottle is also very useful due to a skill I will talk about later. Soon after, I found a Killer Beehive, where another vital skill gets its first demonstration, Decoy 3. The first level creates a decoy when you soul hop during combat, just to distract things. The second level deals damage to whatever attacked the decoy, and the third level does AoE damage. This makes it much faster to harvest souls. Remember that this happens when you soul hop, not when you soul echo, so you need to get rid of your echo to use it consecutively. I found Pick King early, where I hammered the pick houses to make my alchemy engine. Another effect of the Nice Inclination is that it removes Wortox's monster status, meaning pigs, catcoons, and bunnymen are no longer hostile. I decided to base at Bee Queen because of the beehives nearby. This time around there were particularly few hives, but oh well. I could try to find a killer bee biome which has a ton of easy souls to harvest, but I don't want to hold off until finding a biome that might not even exist. After a bit more resource collection, I made myself a piggyback. I realized that I've been sleeping on this item. It does give a speed boost down, but teleporting will make up a vast majority of my movement, so that's fine. Speaking of movement, I'm not getting a Beefalo for a change. The skill tree made teleporting so good that Beefalo would just slow you down. Some argue that this was already the case, but from my experiences, Beefalo were still resoundingly better. Another factor was that you needed them to move heavy objects, but now Wortox can do that by teleporting. This isn't part of the skill tree, just something added alongside it. While exploring and gathering resources, I used another 2 skills for the first time. Impromptu Flautist, which gives a free use of the pan flute every 7 to 9 minutes, and Pleasant Pastoral, which summons 6 souls to be collected with a use of a pan flute. A majority of the free uses will be used just for the 6 souls. While I cannot get hunger and health from them, it feeds into the insatiable need for teleports. A bit later, I went to Pearl. I got an early start on her quests, and got a few out of the way right then. However, my biggest reason for coming here is to wall Pearl into a corner. There is a high chance for rain in the first 8 days, allowing me to give her an umbrella to complete an easy quest. The problem is that if it happens during dusk or night while she's in her house, then I can't complete it, which would end up complicating things a little. Walling her off makes sure she's always available. The following day the rain started, so I teleported back to Pearl and gave her the umbrella. Being able to teleport to Pearl makes her quests much less of a headache. The ruins are the next thing on my checklist, but I have an extra small challenge associated with it. I will not craft soul jars until I'm done with the ruins. I am yet to talk about soul jars. They hold 40 souls, massively increasing your capacity. I have the means of making one, having found a bottle, but in other runs bottles don't come so easily. So I want to show how you can adapt to lack of bottles. That is through catching live bees using the knapsack. The knapsack is a cheaper bug net with twice the uses and AoE. Storing live bees for more souls is certainly not a new strategy in the slightest, but previously I don't think it was worth doing. Now, however, catching them is not only cheaper, but each soul is also more valuable. The pan food is also a pseudo increase in soul capacity. Pretty soon I found the ruins and killed a depth worm for moggles. Similarly to catching bees, I previously didn't consider them worthwhile. Thing about moggles on Wortox is that they enable him to teleport anywhere on screen, where he previously couldn't due to darkness. Before the skill tree, I didn't consider this teleporting valuable enough to warrant getting moggles, but now it's absolutely worth it. When I found a pseudoscience station, I made a Thulecite medallion to reveal the guardian's location, but the labyrinth was just 2 teleports away anyway. This time around, I will focus on looting chests in the labyrinth, another thing made faster by teleporting. The chests contain gems, Thulecite, and nightmare fuel, but I'm also helping myself to some armor. Something I'm hoping to find is a Bad Bat. This is a weapon that deals pretty low damage, but with each hit heals the player and takes away sanity. As you may have noticed, I have absolutely no healing, since the health from souls is gone. I was banking on getting a Bad Bat, but there wasn't one this time around, so I'll just have to fall back on the strategy of just don't get hit lol. Not much new to be said about the fight, but look at me, I'm animation cancelling. You're probably familiar with this as it's widely used, but in case you aren't, the way it works is that by equipping something you interrupt the animation of attacking, allowing you to start your next attack sooner. Learning to do this was way overdue for me, because I just couldn't be bothered to learn. But now I can't stand the idea of not using it. This increases DPS by up to 16.67%. While rhythmically clicking isn't the most entertaining thing in the world, it still adds a little extra to fighting. Animation cancelling is often criticized as cheese, and while it certainly wasn't originally intended to exist, it's been acknowledged by the developers and is here to stay. Regardless, I like doing it, and as such I will. And this Guardian fight was good. I got hit just once. Never mind. The chest contained a lot of yellow and green gems, which is exactly what you want to see. My shopping list consists of 2 Star Caller staffs, a deconstruction staff, a mag, and a pick/axe. Before I left the ruins, I made a backpack to store the remaining resources. Earthquakes can destroy gems, so I'm doing this to protect them. Now that I have the pick/axe, I can take on the werepig. This fight started off about as poorly as it could have, but I wasn't having any of it and was determined to do it hitless from then on. I think this is a good time to address something you may be wondering about. Why am I not using the knapsack as a weapon? It can deal up to 68 damage if you have the Covetous Collector skill and carrying at least 100 souls. At which point it's basically a cheaper dark sword without sanity drain, so why not use it? Quite a few reasons. I'd need to dedicate at least 2 jars just for holding souls, on top of the ones for souls that I actually use. I'm also rushing to get the Shadow Reaper, at which point the knapsack's use would expire anyway. Also, the difference between Hambat and Darksword damage isn't even that big, so it's not like I'm letting go of a game changer. On top of that, taking Covetous Collector would require me to entirely rethink my skill tree. Besides the bad start, I managed to do the fight hitless. I was fortunate enough to find some cave spider dens already, so I collected 8 fossils before leaving the caves. On the surface I made a soul jar. This can hold 40 souls, and I hope to get another. Then I resumed exploration, as I had unfortunately still not uncovered a couple things. I found a second bottle which revealed a sunken treasure. Wait. Never mind, it's actually a land treasure, I guess. Turns out there was a killer bee biome. It goes without saying that this is the best place to base as Wortox, but I'm not willing to move at this point. I can travel here easily anyway. Shortly after, I found the moonstone, just in time for the full moon. I don't know what it is, but every time I do this event, my defense wouldn't hold. Because of that, I'm doing a slightly higher effort setup with 2 dummies. Still needed to use the pan flute, but whatever. Finding the last marble piece was rather time consuming, but I got there. Wortox can now teleport while carrying heavy objects. It's more expensive than normal teleportation, but it's still great to have. Also stumbled upon the celestial orb, which is nice. While I was nearby, I went to open the not sunken treasure and... mirasami tottam. I was now just short on living logs, so I started chopping trees to spawn a tree guard. Then I realized I had actually missed the living forest set piece, a place with dozens of tree guards. And I also missed a totally normal tree right next to it. So basically I'm blind. Back at base, I made a shadow manipulator before preparing to go back to the caves once more. I'm planning on doing 4 things here. Find the atrium, complete the archives, find Toadstool, and gather fossils. But this time around I had already completed the latter too. This is another situation where moggles really shine. Covering this land fast wouldn't be possible in darkness. The archives were not difficult to find and soon I had the astral detector. At which point I teleported to the Guardian's arena to retrieve the key. I want to get the atrium mapped, so I can teleport there immediately when I'm ready for Fuel Weaver. I identified the atrium bridge, the piece of land pointing towards the atrium, and sure enough I saw it across the void. Teleporting into and through the atrium with such ease wouldn't be possible without moggles. At the arena I dropped off the key and assembled the fossils. Being done with caves for the time being, I began looking towards the ocean. I need to get to Lunar Island and have prepared a bunch of resources for Pearl. Lunar's location was abundantly clear and I found it pretty soon. Of course, I needed the altars assembled, but I also need moonglass and moon rocks, which are plentiful here. Using some of the moonglass, I made 3 glass cutters. There's one more thing I need to do at sea. Find salt to get cookie cutter shells, a strictly required resource to completing Pearl's quests. Sticking close to the shores, I found them fairly quickly, and after gathering all that I needed, I returned to base. Now I made a bat. I wasn't actually planning on having to make my own, expecting the labyrinth to provide, but it didn't have a single one. There's still a few days before I can fight shadow pieces, and decided to spend the time fighting Dragonfly. There's a common practice that makes this fight less fun, and I myself am guilty of it. That, as you might expect, is the use of walls, which I'm avoiding this time. Something I probably should have done differently is use soul hopping to kite, because the decoy will get in some extra damage. But I was having too much fun kiting, and I'm also not in a rush because I have time to kill until shadow pieces. When Dragonfly starts spawning larvae, I just started running around avoiding them. Another option is trying to kill them, but I find this more consistent since teleporting makes it easy to avoid them. After a bit they began to die off by themselves, and this is where the ice staff comes in. Thing is, when the final larvae dies naturally, there is a 50-50 chance that Dragonfly gets enraged, or starts another larvae phase. The latter is bad because then I won't get an opportunity to actually damage the boss. But if the last larvae is killed by the player, Dragonfly will enrage 100% of the time. And so you go through this cycle of fighting the boss and summoning phases a couple times until the boss is dead. Assembling the last lunar altar is the only thing left before winter starts, so I go do that, and made a few moonglass axes while I was there. I had to wait a little bit, so I just organized for upcoming fights. With the start of winter, I killed McTusk, who unfortunately dropped nothing. I spent the rest of the day killing merms who had rather irritatingly spawned right next to the shadow pieces. What's the big idea? You said earlier how dark sword damage isn't even that much better compared to Hambat, and now you're using glass cutters? Well, I stand by that, but this DPS increase is still pretty good against the shadow pieces and Fuel Weaver. It's valuable to maximize damage against Fuel Weaver because of the small attack windows, and killing these bosses quicker means a quicker rift activation, which is a big bottleneck. But that's merely a secondary reason. The main reason is simply because I had nothing else to fill the time until shadow pieces. This time around, I left the bishop for last, because it has less health than the rook. I messed up once, twice, putting this fight at the worst end of the spectrum. I sure hope this'll remain the messiest boss of the run. Now I had everything to fight the Fuel Weaver, but instead of going straight to the atrium, I first made a Thule-side club. Why did I make a Thule-side club if I already have glass cutters? For the speed boost, so I can do this. Dodge the bone cage. But why dodge the bone cage when I can just teleport out? Funny, that's why. There's not a whole lot of benefit to doing this when all it saves is a single soul, but it's just really fun and satisfying to do. Nice inclination is very valuable here. As you may know, Fuel Weaver has a massive sanity drain. Souls are an entirely reliable method on restoring sanity, allowing me to forego any other preparations. This is one of the two bosses where Soul Pierce would help, a skill that makes souls damage creatures they pass through. But this would force me to rethink my entire skill tree, and honestly, I don't want the Fuel Weaver to be easier. Speaking of which, Decoy can sometimes make things harder by distracting the Fuel Weaver when you want him to follow you. But that's a risk I don't mind taking. This was a clean fight, having taken damage just twice, and Fuel Weaver having eaten just one Woven Shadow. With Fuel Weaver defeated, I get the option to activate the Rift. It'll take 5 days to open, so unfortunately I have a bit more waiting in store. I was short on green gems. I searched both the labyrinth and atrium but found none. At least I got another bat and pick/axe. In a previously unexplored branch, I found the resting horror which dropped the blueprint for a ruins chair, and I got my missing green gem. So I crafted several construction amulets and deconstruction staffs, as well as the crafting station for rift equipment. I started looking for Claudes and killed McTusk a second time, who dropped both his items. Finding Claudes was fairly quick, and I started the fight. This fight was rather thought-provoking. Because fighting Claudes, one of the easiest bosses in the game, was approximately 1,000,000,000 times messier than fighting Fuel Weaver. It got me thinking about this no soul healing challenge, that it's not turning out to be as difficult as I expected it to be. I was worried that I had become too pampered with easy health restoration, since I haven't needed to rely on traditional healing methods for a long time. But at this point in time, I had realized that I can get away with taking damage. Combine that with feeling unthreatened by a boss, and I kinda stopped trying. I did really enjoy the nature of a challenge where getting hit is more consequential, so I think I'll do similar things in the future. As for the fight, I started to teleport to dodge, mostly just to shake things up a bit. I sure hope this'll remain the messiest boss of the run. The loot didn't drop anything useful, other than the wax paper of course. Now it's time I finish Pearl quests. There is a skill that's a bit subtle, but extremely powerful: Capricious Movement. This reduces the price of map teleports depending on how much of the world has been explored, going as low as half price. I planted berry bushes, gave her the vest and upgraded her house. I let her out of the wall so she can look at my chair and then made one using her blueprints. This left me at 9 out of 10 points for completion, but the final one requires a tad bit of waiting. In the meantime, the rifts should be close to open, so I headed back into the caves. Walking through the ruins, I wasn't finding any dreadstone outcrops, so I ventured into the nearby stalagmite biome where I found one. This spawn is at a pretty bad location, which caused a lot of problems. Cave spiders and the nightmares posed a major nuisance before the ink blights even spawned. Turned out I was going to have to fight the rictus. Usually they're a softball compared to the ink blight trio, but spiders made this magnitudes more difficult. I even used up my bat. Having learned time and time again that hubris is my biggest killer, I wanted to get the second one from base. What's good about Wortox here is that the decoy is an easy way to get the rictus out of hiding. You cannot actually attack them while they're invisible, and need some sort of AoE damage to reveal them. From then on, I find them pretty easy. Well, they weren't this time around, but I got there eventually. I hope this'll remain the messiest fight of the run. First thing back on the surface, I went back to Pearl and left the game. This is because relogging allows you to complete the chair quest multiple times if you do it after 8 or more minutes. This absolutely constitutes as an exploit, but one that I want to do because I don't like Pearl. With that, I had completed the quests. At base, I used my newly required Pure Horror and Dark Tatters to, well, firstly produce more through my construction and deconstruction items, but the final product was a cowl, a reaper, an umbrella, and a load of repair kits. So what's the deal with Rift gear? The main reason I'm getting them is because you need the reaper to use Wortox's shadow affinity, but they're also very good gear independently of that. The cowl is slightly above average armor, providing both planar and regular protection, but more importantly, while wearing a cowl and using the reaper, you deal 68 damage a hit, and consecutive hits get stronger. At 6 hits and above, you are doing 88 damage. As for the umbrella, it protects against acid rain in the caves, and can replace the umbrella. Finally, they all have high durability, and can be fully repaired with repair kits. I made 22 of them, which is actually way too much. There are 2 pieces of equipment I avoided making. One is the Void Robe. It provides identical protection as the cowl with the added benefit of removing all sanity loss from monsters. I tried using this, but it wasn't sufficient because it does not take away the sanity drain of the Reaper. There's also the Gloomerang, which is very good against 2 of the remaining bosses. Too good, in fact, almost entirely reducing them to just holding F. Yeah, remember how I don't like ranged weapons? And with that done, I'm changing my skill tree. The biggest reason I'm doing this is to get shadow affinity. I had tried several different skill trees for this point in time. My first iteration looked something like this, notably taking Soul Pierce 2, a skill which makes souls damage enemies they pass through. This skill helps against B-Queen. And that's it. With Shadow Affinity, Wortox is already good against B-Queen. So spending 4 points to help more with her didn't make much sense. Being so underwhelmed with Soul Pierce, I tried taking everything except it. This had me investing in perks that do almost nothing. Pleasant Pastoral falls off at this point in time due to having acquired plenty of soul jars. Overflowing Greed increases soul capacity by 5 for each jar held, which is nice, but jars do such a good job at letting you carry more souls that this isn't very useful in my opinion. Then there's also Covetous Collector, which at this point in time slightly increases decoy damage and nothing else. I ended up settling for this, something almost identical to my previous skill tree, except of course Shadow Affinity over Lunar, and I'd also prefer Cloudy Careman over Pleasant Pastoral at this point in time. All the 4 teleporting skills are just as good as before, if not better. Jars are still amazing, and Decoy works very well with Shadow Affinity. Once again, I go for the nice inclination since the Reaper has a sanity drain. So what is Wortox's Shadow Affinity? It adds an extra effect to the Reaper. At the cost of Soul Echo, the Reaper will do 88 damage to all nearby targets, and if there's only a single target, it receives 2 times 88 damage. This gives it a good synergy with Reverberation, since you can get this special attack twice for each teleport instead of just once. Since it consumes your Soul Echo, you can use Decoy more frequently. This makes its AoE a bit redundant, but it's extra damage for each teleport. At this point in time, I have done almost everything non-fighting related, so I can do bosses back to back to back. The first one is B-Queen, because Deer Corpse doesn't count, of course. It doesn't take a genius to realize that the AoE from Shadow Affinity is very useful against B-Queen. You can use teleporting both to kite and to deal damage via Shadow Affinity and Decoy, both of which are AoE. I'm not animation cancelling this time around because I need my mouse to teleport. It's possible to animation cancel without the use of the mouse through stutter stepping, but I just haven't bothered to learn that yet. Come back in 2 years when I finally get around to it. Maybe. But around halfway through the fight I realized that I was getting lower in health than I expected. You see, this was only my second time fighting B-Queen without soul healing. The first time was very messy, much like this one, but I was tired at the time so I just chalked it up to that. But now I was realizing that I was actually just underprepared. At this point in time, this fight is supposed to be something of a no-brainer, having constant restoration of souls and tons of armor. However, take away the healing and the boss is suddenly not such a pushover. I wasn't planning on this, but I started using my pan flutes for extra damage. Cloudy Careman helped out here immensely. Getting 5 seconds of attacking without being attacked translated to a lot of damage I would have otherwise struggled doing. I killed her by a hair, having just 3 health left. That was completely undeserved and I should have practiced this more. As such, this will remain the messiest boss of the run. Remember how the challenge of this run was to not heal from souls? Yeah, you can forget about that now that I have jelly beans. Although jelly beans are, well, food, obviously. Wortox is barely penalized for eating them. Thing is that character perks that change stat from food do not affect the overtime healing of jelly beans, so Wortox gets 1 health instead of 2 from eating one, but then the following 120 health gained over time is unchanged. If regular healing food is not good enough, then I'll let them eat the jelly beans. I went to the scrapyard to find myself a potato, but there weren't any. I spawned more trash via the werepig and got one soon. Oh, and while I'm here, I might as well fight him, I guess. The only thing I have to say about this boss is that it falls for the decoy thing very easily. Besides that, it just kinda falls over. Let's go fight a real boss. When I take on Toadstool, I usually do it with torches as my tool for removing trees. But this time around I tried the Moonglass axes. This makes the fight considerably faster, and I had plenty of time to craft these during autumn. Besides that, I also have my pan flute and a couple ice staffs to buy time on chopping the trees. The moonglass axes were definitely the stronger option, but I think I might use torches in the future, just because they make the fight more interesting. The next boss on my list is Crab King. I headed over to his location, but as I was about to start the fight, I realized that my ore is almost broken. I tried to find another piece of driftwood but stranded myself. I had actually dropped my grass and twigs on the boat, so I had to gather more for a new one. That was silly, and I never actually got another piece of driftwood, so I settled for a regular ore. I must confess that before practicing for this run, I hadn't actually fought the reworked Crab King yet. Well, I did, but that was as Wanda, so does it really count? In the Claws phase, you can just speed past them and the crab minions are rendered harmless with a pan flute. It's a fairly easy boss fight, but at times it feels clunky and you get sunk when it looks like you shouldn't have. This also happens sometimes. Just don't be greedy and you'll do fine. Once Crab King died, I took the final altar to Lunar, activating the Moonstorm and then retrieved my piggyback. But before going to the storm, I'll make use of this long night. Do you like the twins? Me neither. You're the main reason I took Cloudy Caramel. It allows me to more efficiently use pan flutes against them. And yeah, that about wraps up everything there is to be said. With the twins fight on hold, I have nothing else to do but work towards summoning Celestial Champion. I gathered all the resources and helped Wagstaff, at which point it was night once more, but I didn't have enough time to finish the fight. At this point I just need to kill Celestial Champion and finish off the twins, so back to Lunar Island. Despite what you might think, ending a run on Celestial Champion is surprisingly relaxing. It's just not very difficult for a final boss. While it has a lot of different powerful attacks across multiple phases, they're relatively easy to learn to dodge. I even know a few people who consider this fight a snooze fest, and while I think it's decent enough, I see where they're coming from. None of the combat skills are particularly useful here, but they still equate to more damage. Another night came during the fight, where I summoned what is left of the twins. Celestial Champion ended up killing it. Turning the twins on other bosses is a surprisingly effective strategy, but one I didn't want to use this run. But at this point it's whatever. Because I want to use the Reaper, I'm wearing a cowl opposed to a bone helm. This means Gestalts can put me to sleep, which isn't as bad as it sounds. Also, hounds. Anyway, that wraps up the run. This turned out to be my best run by quite a margin. Needless to say, Wortox is good now, but I think I also improved a lot since my last run. Not only did I start animation cancelling, but I feel I've become more skillful across the board. I enjoyed the lack of soul healing. Needing to play better enabled me to focus more, and everything felt more satisfying. If anything, it wasn't difficult enough, since a lot of the better healing options work on Wortox anyway. Seriously, stop making pierogies, start making bat bats. So in the future, I wanted to try similar, harder restrictions. I wanted to make it clear that I'm not saying his healing is bad, just that it's not very useful to players who don't need a lot of it. As for the skill tree, there's a lot of it I don't like, but the good parts are nothing short of revolutionary. Wortox is the second character in all the game to whom a beefalo is unhelpful, which says a lot about the strength of his teleporting. I found this massive speed to be very fun, allowing you to zoom past the mundane parts of the game. Fun fact, after the run was completed, there were 923 stingers in the world. Wortox has achieved something no other character has. He had a complete turnaround in the eyes of the community, going from being considered overpowered to weak. All characters are getting updated, but Wortox got extra attention when he received Soul Echo, Map Teleportation, and a few other things in 2022. This was thanks to people discussing his weakness, giving Clay an idea of what to do. People often take criticism as an attack, but I'm of the mentality that it's for the better. Clay definitely listened to the complaints of Wortox players, as the Skilltree provided fixes to long overdue grievances. So after all these years, Wortox finally feels like a complete character.